We mentioned very briefly gratitude and gratitude journaling, writing about things that we're grateful for in Science Versus podcast, which I recommended to you. It just came out very recently, this specific episode, October 5th, Self-Care, Can You Hack Your Mood? And he was talking about all kinds of trends that have to do with cold plunges, going into ice baths, and all sorts of things in order to lift you up from depression. Not that strong of an evidence over there. Let's put this aside for now. But there was this other part, chapter 5 and 6, about does gratitude journaling makes us happier or not? Does it help in some way? And I was telling you that I used to think until 3-4 years ago that the science is still pending, but there seems to be an accumulation of evidence showing that something important happens when we do gratitude, but we need to do this a certain way. So it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen. It's like not like a magic solution to everything, but I do feel there's something meaningful there. And this is from this morning. So the reason why I decided to put gratitude and combine this with happiness is because of Shankar in Hidden Brain podcast. So this is something that I listen to when I'm on like the MTR and all that. And I want to just play to you. He has a very soothing voice. Sometimes I also listen to this before I go to sleep. So I just want to play to you the beginning of the podcast. So he has amazing introductions that I think is a good setup for today's session, just to get us to reflect a little bit about why is it that we have so many wonderful things around us that we take those for granted, and we tend to very easily move towards emphasizing the stress and the negatives and not acknowledging the amazing people and the amazing things that are part of our lives. So I'll just play a little bit of that for you, just as an introduction, and then we'll talk about the key takeaways from that podcast.
This is Hidden Brain. I'm Shankar Vedantam. If you make at least $30,000 a year, congratulations. Your income is 10 times the global median and in the top 5% of incomes worldwide. If you are older than 35, congratulations. For much of human history, many people died before they were 30. If you have a job and stable income, live in a democratic country, and have a college degree, you are in a rarefied group in the history of humankind. If you enjoy good health, good friends, nice vacations, you really ought to get down on your knees and thank Providence. So, are you on your knees yet? Why is it, even when our lives are objectively better than the lives of most people who ever lived, we are all prone to seeing the clouds, not the silver lining? This is true not just when it comes to global and historical statistics, but in our daily lives. We notice small delays at the airport, but ignore the miracle that we can literally fly across the world. We take our health for granted and only notice the gifts of our limbs and our senses when they are taken away from us. We zero in on annoyances in personal relationships and rarely pause to acknowledge what is wonderful about our friends, families, and co-workers. Our ungratitude for our good fortune is so automatic and ubiquitous that it seems obvious there must be an underlying psychology to it. That's the topic of today's show, the enemies of gratitude and how to fight them, this week on Hidden Brain.
I just had to finish the whole episode, even though I know this stuff. So like I teach this, I do research on this, I know the people involved here. So the person who he interviews is this person. We've done a lot of replications of his work, and I'll share a little bit that with you. He's very prolific, very well known, has published a lot of articles. But what I like about his articles and his experimental work is that it really seems to have meaning. So it's not just the statistics about, okay, there's this effect, but it also uncovers a world of opportunities for us to get to know people a little bit better. And they always make me reflect about my own life and my own connections and my own experiences. So it doesn't happen very often. Judgment decision making, we have a lot of these cognitive biases. But what's really nice about his work is that I feel like there's an added benefit to that really helps me to overcome myself in order to better myself, those around me, in our lives. So I really recommend that you go and listen to this. I just want to highlight key takeaways from what is discussed in this literature, and it talks about the importance of gratitude. So cultivating gratitude enables us to appreciate the wonders of everyday life and leads to more fulfilling existence. Cultivating gratitude can lead to more fulfilling and contented life, making us more generous, willing to help others, and so forth. And if we connect this back to previous week, then it also leads us to greater happiness or overcoming stress, dealing with all sorts of things that are happening around us. And the big question, I think, even if we somehow get ourselves to think of gratitude, how often is it that we really express gratitude? What is a good way to express gratitude? How to tell others that they're meaningful to us? So what I suggest is that we'll do a little bit of an exercise. First, you do this with yourself. So I'll give you some time, 5 minutes. I want you to think of one person in your life right now who you have not told that they mean a lot to you, but that you're grateful for them, their existence in your life. So it could be a parent, siblings, friends, somebody that you have a way of reaching out to, but have never done that in order to tell them how important they are in your life. You don't need to do anything like that. You need to just do this for yourself. So I suggest just take a moment, think about a person, write about 2 things that you're most grateful for about this person and them being in your life. And then I'm asking you to just write 1 paragraph, which would be kind of like a hypothetical letter that should you at some point in your life want to tell them that they're meaningful, how would you do that? 2-3 sentences, not very long. We don't want to do overcomplicated, but I do want to give you just 5 minutes. Just sit down with yourself, think about this, identify 1 person, think about 2 important things that you're grateful for this person in your life, and then write them a 1 paragraph later. Okay, and then we'll follow up, and I'll tell you. We'll discuss a little bit about that. Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes. Just take your time. If you have any questions or something you want to ask me about regarding this exercise, let me know. But I think it's pretty straightforward. Take your time with this. Good. Since we have a little late arrivals, I'll just ask you, as they are still writing, how does this exercise feel? Easy, difficult? What did you experience during these 5 minutes? What does it mean to find somebody that you feel grateful for? What goes through your head as you're doing this kind of exercise?
It's really hard to think about things, very specific things. But I just randomly think someone close to me, and I start to think whether there are things I'm grateful for.
Yes.
As I write, more things comes out.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's like there is one person you have the immediate thing you want to be grateful for, but just randomly pick someone. There are lots of things.
Right. Can you say a little bit why is it difficult to choose a person? Just like a lot going on, or what's the difficulty?
It's I'm not used to express my gratitude.
Yeah.
When I think about it, I can't recall a moment where I say thank you for specific thing to them.
Yes.
I assume I am now grateful for it.
I understand. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Any similar sentiments? Does this feel similar to you? Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit? No? Okay. Anybody else want to share that? Yes, please.
Maybe for me, it's not much about confusing feelings.
Okay.
I do have some people in mind that I'm very grateful for. And I have the opportunity to express that. And so, like, this reminds me of like some past experience. Maybe this person helped me improve a lot.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a chance to say that to him or her.
Right.
Yeah, I would make a comparison like between the past me and the present me.
Okay.
And I feel like, oh, I need to change a lot because of this person.
Right. So to think of the contributions that people had to you in your change, in your development, in doing something meaningful to you in your life. Thank you. That's great. How are you three doing? You doing okay? You found something? Yeah. Wrote something?
My situation is the
Opposite, yeah.
who I can write about because
Uh-huh.
usually if someone is in my life and I'm grateful, I have avoided to with them.
You have? Okay.
At some point, so then I had to think about new people who
Uh-huh.
actually came into my life.
Okay. Yeah, good. So I guess we also have some individual differences about the way that we express gratitude, whether we share this with others, how much gratefulness do we have? Another thing that we talked about very, very briefly, we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But aside from gratitude, there is this thing that people say contributes to happiness, and it's talking to strangers. One of the things that I think is very curious about HQ classes is that we don't actually get to know other people in our classroom unless we have a giving game or unless we're like forced into a situation, but then very fast we kind of like group into like the teams that we have or the people that we know, and we don't get out of our comfort zone. And then when we actually meet them, it's like, what do we talk about? Like, I don't know anything about this person. What is the bridge that would enable us to meet new people, reach out outside of our social circle? So what I'll ask you to do is to sit with another person who you don't know. I'll assign you to somebody else. I'll give you numbers and find the person who has the same number. And then I want you to do this. So tell somebody you don't know about the person you're grateful for. Share what it is that you just wrote. So who is this person? What does this person mean to you? What are the two things that you're grateful for? Tell them about yours. Don't need to go into all their personal details. Don't even need to say who that person is, like by name. Just like, and maybe share something about what's meaningful, what connected you, and all that. And then also listen to what the other person is saying about their lives. Okay? So there's not a lot that I want you to do beyond that. You can if you want, but you don't have to. Just to tell somebody else about what it is that you just wrote, and then receive from somebody else what it is that they wrote. And we'll do that for about 3 minutes. So what I'll do is that I'll give you a number from 1 to 12. See who the other person is that has the same number as you, okay? All right, so get together, sit together, find yourself like a corner. First, introduce your name if you don't know that person, and then just tell the other person what it is that you did. I know 5 minutes seems like a very short time, it is. But hopefully, if something interesting happened and you want to get to know the person a little bit better, plenty of time after class. Hopefully, it's the last of your classes today. But I do want to get a little bit of your impressions. I don't know how many of you actually know the other person from before, but especially to those who this is the first time that they're talking. How was this for you? How did you feel about this? Is gratitude a good way to start a conversation, to share this kind of story? You're nodding, yes, kind of, yeah. Seems good, yeah, kind of, okay, great. Any impressions? What did you feel through this very short exercise? Any thoughts to share? Yes, please. Did you know each other from before? Okay, great. Okay, mutuals, yeah. You didn't think of the same person though?
No.
Okay. Uh-huh.
But he
I know her person.
Ah.
It's a lot of what we work, a lot of similarities that we look at the person that we're
Okay.
for.
Yeah.
Just having the presence.
Right. So already you found like a shared connection and then some common grounds of how you think about the person and other people. Yeah, the things that are meaningful for you. Great. So how's the feeling overall, having this 5 minutes together? Meaningful, positive overall. Yeah. Yeah. Not too much stress or, okay, good. Thank you for that. Any other impressions you want to share? Yeah. Anything else?
She talked about like how when she talked about her person and I got jealous of like she had that.
Oh, jealousy. Can you say a little bit more without too many details?
She had a friend that she talked to.
Ah, okay.
I mean, she talked to them. She really appreciated her like being also.
Mm.
It's very genuine. Like,
Yeah. So sometimes we also can see qualities in other people through these stories of what we would like to experience in our own lives, and maybe how we would like to build connections with others, maybe learn from others how they do social connections. I know sometimes it's very difficult to bring, let's say, introverts and extroverts together because there's a little bit of a clash of personality. But there's so much that these two personalities can learn from one another, and if they just have an opportunity to sit down and talk about things, actually, both of them can benefit from that. And sometimes also, I know it feels a little bit lonely to sit in a classroom, maybe isolated. Just sitting next to somebody and having a conversation at the beginning of the class can already boost a lot of your mood, if it's not a too stressful situation. So I hope this was comfortable for you. I'll just give you a few seconds. If you want, you can go back to your own seats, or you can stay in the same seats. It's up to you. The last thing I wanted to suggest, it's completely optional, but I'll tell you why I recommend that you do this. There are some wonderful videos on YouTube about experiments done in classrooms that people are asked to come in and write what it is that you just wrote about one person. And then typically what follows is that they force the person to call them and just read out loud to them what it is that they wrote about them. And I just watched a few before class, and I have to say, just thinking about this makes me feel like I get teary and emotional, because these are like strong things. Sometimes people think about people that they have not seen for a very long time, or people that are very meaningful for them, but just the thought of communicating this to the other person just, brings a lot of emotion up. And then what happens when the actual phone call takes place is just mind-blowing. It's very scary, but I will give you an excuse to do that. So you can take what it is that you wrote right now, not mandatory, it's completely up to you. And you can say, my professor forced me to send this to you after we had the class exercise. And if you want, completely optional as well, you can tell us next class what happened. So I invite you to take what it is that you wrote as is, the two things or the one paragraph, send this to the other person saying, I'm really sorry, didn't mean to bother, but this crazy professor did this one thing and now forced me to send this to you. I just wanted you to have this, and then see what happens. So from personal experience and from what I've seen from others and from science, this seems to do wonderful things. And I think, just imagine somebody reaching out to you with this kind of thing, just telling you that they're grateful for you in their lives. It just makes your whole day, your whole week, your whole month a lot better, especially in stressful times, especially when we're going through hardships. So sometimes we can take something as small as a class exercise, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, to get to know a new person, connect with another person, and then reconnect with somebody meaningful in your life in order to share with them why it's important to have them, why you're grateful for them in your life, and then hopefully make something meaningful out of that in your life for your happiness. Okay? Thank you for being open-minded and taking part in this. I really appreciate this. If you have experiences to share afterwards, I'm very interested. So this person here, the Tom Gilad, so he does a lot of research on gratitude. I wanted to share with you a little bit more about the research that I know from him and some of the replications that we did with him about experiences, happiness, gratitude, and all of that. So here, for example, is a classic article, and I'll just zoom in So I am what I do, not what I have. The differential centrality of experiential and material purchases to the self. So when we talk about how we spend our money or how we spend our time, we can spend this on specific things. Many people, immediately what comes to mind when they're thinking about spending money is to purchase things, to go and buy something for themselves. So we talked about last time, we contemplated food a lot. So doing ice cream or something very, very local in Hong Kong that we feel like will make us feel better. But it could be, if this was meaningful and helped your happiness or connection to others, at the same time invested, or perhaps the same kind of money can be invested in spending more time with others or having a shared experience together. So this is the study. They had a bunch of studies there. People tend to think of their experiential purchases as more connected to the self than their possessions. And the nice thing is that we've actually replicated this. So 2 students at HKU, and this is what was published just recently in Collabra. So we did this replication of Carter and Gilovich, and it was an amazingly, surprisingly, I think one of our most successful replications. It's like everything worked out with some very strong effects. So you can see here that if we just zoom into this, experiential purchases were perceived as more reflective of true self than material purchases for both the self and for strangers, and that when meeting a new person, information about their experiential purchases was considered to be more insightful, useful, and fun to talk about. And I don't know if you can understand Cohen's d effect, but a Cohen's d of 1.14 and 1.96 is unbelievably strong. Like there's nothing that I've seen that comes even close to this. 1.96 Cohen's d. So no doubt that when people talk about their experiences, it's a lot more fun for them than talking about something that they purchased. So sometimes when we share about a person that's meaningful for us and why they're meaningful for us and what is it that we share together, the connection that we had, it's a lot more fun to talk about. It's a lot more meaningful. It's a lot more connecting between people. Self-concept was more strongly associated with experiential purchases than with material purchases. There was a negative association between experiential purchases satisfaction and the willingness to exchange memory. So I won't go into too much of that. I just want to show you a lot of stats in there. Not going to go over this, but I do want to focus on this column. And this is an interpretation of a replication. So we compare what it is that we've done in the replication to what it is that Tom Gilovich did in their study. And what you can see is that in some aspects, the study won. Our effects were actually stronger than the effects that they found in their study. Some of them were a little bit smaller, and some of them were just like, on par. So it's just really nice to see when replications like this work, and almost everything that we've done with Tom, and I'll show you a few more afterwards, seems to be like that. A few weeks ago, there was this, I don't know if you saw this on the news, but has anyone been to Burning Man? Do you know what Burning Man is? Have you heard of Burning Man? No? So I strongly recommend this. You don't have to do this in the US. Now there are Burning Man all over the world. Burning Man is this crazy event where people go to the desert in Nevada, not too far away from California, and people just come there. So many of them dressed like hippies and just like it's out in the desert, and they build stuff and they share stuff together. And you can look at some of the videos, very inspirational stuff. They just live there for like a week, only riding bicycle or walking, and then just sharing experiences, dancing or doing whatever it is. It's just like a spiritual kind of feeling. And what's interesting about this is that it offers transformative experiences for the person. So taking part in this kind of gathering had lasting impressions on people for months and years to go. So even though this was like 1 week, so imagine what it would be like, not that it's going to happen to us, but that we were just like stuck with each other, only us here for a week together, what would that mean? So if we did something like 5 minutes, being able to get to know people, having kind of like a situation where we're all stuck together and getting to know one another, can either drive us insane and want to kill one another, or get all of us to really bond and be very close to one another. So what usually happens in Burning Man and this event tends to be a lot more of the bonding, the connection, getting to know people. So there's something very, very strong about experiences that goes far beyond materialistic things, purchases, and they're taken for granted in our lives. So a lot of stats in here. I'm not going to go into this in more detail. All right, I want to share with you a paper that was published in Science. And for this, I want you to kind of put your scientist hat. And this is Science paper from 2008. And I want you to try and think about this critically. So I'll tell you what this is about, and you tell me how you feel about this. I wasn't like a researcher back then, but when I got to know this paper, I thought, this is terrific. I really like it that a paper like this gets to Science. We don't publish a lot of social psychology things in Science, but for this, it really seems to be something fundamental. Although much research has examined the effect of income on happiness, and we spend a lot of time talking about this in the last session, we suggest that how people spend their money may be at least as important as how much money they earn. Specifically, we hypothesize that spending money on other people may have more positive impact on happiness than spending money on oneself. So it's a little bit like the things that we discussed in terms of experiences, but what they were saying here is that instead of spending money that you have on yourself, spend it on other people. Thoughts, reactions, convincing, not convincing, sounds good, doesn't sound good. Yeah, to spend it not on everybody in the world, just spending more on you. I love language. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So what do you think makes it to be a love language? So it's interesting. I think what kind of like got me thinking about this a lot is when we talk about morality, is like, why do we do the things that we do? So we talked about pro-social behavior, about what is the right thing to do. It's like, morally, what should we do? The 1% versus the 5. Should we focus on our in-group, our out-group? Like, what should we do? What is the right thing to do? But here, it's more about what makes us more happy. So it's not that, giving to other people is the right thing to do, but there's also some selfish benefit. Like, I want to be happier, therefore I will give to other people. So I like it that you framed it as a love language, because to me, what was confusing about this is that it seemed a little bit like a selfish framing to what I would have liked to be a love language. So if you do something because you just hope you will be happier, is this about love, or is this about loving yourself? I'm not really sure. So this is a very confusing thing to me, but I really wanted to get to see whether this is something solid. How do I know if something is solid or not? First of all, it's important to read the entire article to see what it is that they actually wrote. So one of the interesting things is that I actually found this very small comment. Reports. Spending money on others promotes happiness. We recently identified a bug in the statistical package SPSS 14. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with SPSS 14, but I would say 80 to 90% of the world back in 2006, 2008 used SPSS 14. So if there's a bug that affects something, it probably has affected everything in 2006 to 2008. And they wrote about this here. This bug affected the data set for the study N equals 16. So already you can see some of the sample size, right? Primarily because of this error decreased the variance in our data set. Correcting this error alters the critical statistical test such that the effect of prosocial spending on happiness is reduced from the originally reported effect of with p-value lower than 0.02 to what? P-value lower than 0.01115. So already very interesting. science paper. Later, they identified a bug, and then they came in, and it's in a small. So they haven't like changed the article, or retracted, or just wrote something very big on this. The main analysis has a bug in it, but it's just like a very small note that you really need to read very carefully in order to do this. The corrected data is available from the first author's website. So already I have to say I'm concerned, right? What should we do when we see something like this? How to approach this? What should we expect as a follow-up to this? So we had a major finding. This is in Science, cited a lot, TED Talks, it's in books, and now we have identified a bug that showed us that maybe things are not as significant p-value as we thought before. What's the logical next step? Replication. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Who should do this replication? The same people. Yeah, it's like you've messed up, right? Not. Let's say IBM, SPSS messed up. Let's blame them on this. But at the very least, we expect this team here to do a replication, right? So they did. They followed up with this. Got another paper. It took a bunch of years. It took 12 years for them to come out with this replication, but they did do this, and they conducted a follow-up, and this is what they found in their follow-up. So they're asking, does spending money on others promote happiness? And this time they did this as a registered report, which is very, very good. So I, as an open science scholar, really like this. I really appreciate that they did this. Now the question just remains, does it hold or not, right? So they ran 3 different studies. And what you can see here is that we have like experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3, a lot more participants than before. So we have 712 students, 1,950 adults, and then 5,200 participants in different things regarding, spending money on others. And then what we found is some of the things work. All right, some of the things work, but some of them really didn't. So now it's really confusing because we have one study that showed some effects, a lot weaker than we thought, but then 2 studies that don't show much of an effect. So already much better step than just like a science paper that hasn't been corrected. So a good step forward, lots of open science, register reports, open materials. It's just that we need to be very, very humble about this situation. So we thought in 2008 that, whatever we spend money on others is going to make us happy, but now we're not so sure anymore. So I was trying to get additional information about this, which I will share with you after a 5-minute break. So 5 minutes, go refresh yourself, come back, and I'll tell you about the most updated evidence. So we're talking again about Elizabeth Dunn, Larry Aknin, and this time we have a new person coming in. I don't know if you remember Ashley, but Ashley was talking about time versus money. And she has this wonderful book that I shared with you last time in Happiness 2 weeks ago. So Ashley joined them in order to, just from 2022, try and summarize this literature. So I like Ashley coming in and trying to fix things. She's done this a number of times, and they were trying to do like a meta-analysis of all the experiments by this group and asking others. And what you can see here is like a summary of all of those with the different types of experiments. So some of them are behavioral, some of them are recall. And what you can see here is that based on the method, it seemed like there's variations, and some methods are better than others. But generally, when we do a meta-analysis, we try to aggregate everything together and come to a conclusion. And what is nice about this is that they come to the conclusion that although the evidence appears somewhat mixed, we argue that the emotional benefits of pro-social spending are robust and replicable in large samples. So I like this approach. I like it that they do open science. I like it that they do meta-analysis. I like it that they try to aggregate. I like it that they involve other people. But as you can see, it's still unfolding, 2022. If you care about happiness and you care about prosociality and you care about altruism and effectiveness, then you can join this group, and us at HKU trying to contribute to this group to do some more fun stuff about happiness and pro-social behavior. So we try and get into this, but it does seem like there is suggestive evidence that contributes to that. Another big meta-analysis that also includes like a publication bias adjustments and all of that. Just look at these samples. We're talking about 200,000 participants altogether, showing an effect size which is kind of like small to moderate, not the big effect size that maybe was publicized in Science, but we're talking about an R of 0.13. So whenever you want to know whether there's evidence for something, you read a science paper, you want to understand how big is this replicable, just go to the recent literature, make sure that you have registered reports, make sure that you have a meta-analysis, make sure that it's solid, that doesn't only include the original authors from the science paper, but also has other researchers that looked at this literature. So it seems like altogether, there is something that connects pro-social behavior with happiness. There is some kind of a link in there, not very strong, but it does seem to be connected. Molly is a neuroscientist, and she is also a very brave soul. I think when you come from so-called Ivy League universities, you can do this kind of stuff. She actually goes to Davos, the World Economic Forum, and preaches to people over there how they should spend their money on others. Very, very brave. I'll share 2 sessions from a talk that she gave over there about some very interesting neuroscientific findings. I typically don't go into neuroscience. I don't understand it well enough. I don't understand what goes on in there. And the samples are usually very, very small and very, very noisy. But with Molly, she always does both behavioral and fMRI neuroscience stuff. And she's a gifted communicator, so very easy to follow and understand.
The World Economic Forum is perhaps an unusual place to share scientific evidence that money won't necessarily make you happy. But here we are, and it gets worse. I'm here to suggest that certain kinds of money might even make you less happy. At first, this may seem to contradict the classic economic model of human nature, Homo economicus, whose happiness depends solely on maximizing material self-interest. But research in psychology and neuroscience suggests maybe a better model is Homo moralis, whose happiness depends not just on self-interest, but also the welfare of others. In my lab, we've been studying how the value of money itself depends on whether it was earned morally. Now, the idea that money can be tainted can be traced back at least to biblical times, where we see the first mention of the term filthy lucre, or money earned in a dishonest or dishonorable way. We've been testing this idea in the lab with experiments where we give people the opportunity to earn some money for themselves by delivering mildly painful electric shocks to either themselves or a stranger. The shocks feel a bit like a bee sting that lasts for half a second. They don't cause any physical damage, I assure you, but they are unpleasant. So when people in our experiments make these decisions, they face a moral dilemma. Now, crucially, the decisions are totally private and unobserved. So we might expect people to be pretty selfish in this situation because there are no extrinsic incentives, like fear of judgment or punishment, to prevent someone from shocking a stranger for money. In these studies, we observe a wide range of behaviors. We see people who refuse to deliver a single shock to another person in exchange for even $30. We also see people who will deliver 20 painful shocks to another person in exchange for just 10 cents. What's especially interesting, though, is to compare the average price per shock for a stranger versus oneself. And we see ill-gotten gains are less valuable than money earned decently. On average, people require about twice as much money to shock a stranger than themselves.
Wouldn't you like to have a shock machine here at HKU? To put some, no? Cool design. I don't understand how they did their IRB. But we can do these kinds of things if we can show that the electric shocks don't have any lasting effects, and if it's very important for us to understand something meaningful about the world. So of course there's a twist to this. We would like to think of ourselves as being that good. However, there's more to the story than that, and it's called rationalizing. And this is what Molly has to say about that.
Now, you might be wondering at this point, if ill-gotten gains are truly less valuable, how can we explain corruption? We're curious about the same thing. And we have a hunch that if people believe or can convince themselves that the money goes to a good cause, this might restore the value of an ill-gotten gain. To test this in some preliminary studies, we added a twist to our experiment. In the profit condition, as before, people can earn money for themselves by shocking themselves or a stranger. In the charity condition, the money goes to a children's cancer charity instead. The differences between these conditions were quite striking. As we saw before, with profit, most people would rather personally profit from their own pain than a stranger's pain. But this was not the case when the money went to charity. If anything, people seemed to be slightly more willing to shock another person than themselves for a good cause. What this suggests is that the value of money depends not just on its moral consequences, it also might depend on the stories we can tell about our choices. It's pretty difficult to justify hurting a stranger for your own personal profit, but it's for the greater good. This might counteract the corruption of value. Or in other words, ill-gotten gains might be able to be laundered with good storytelling.
So I think all of us can see some instances of that in society. And I do wanted to share with you the problems with being prosocial or being moral, because sometimes we use rationalization, we use morality in order to justify all sorts of things that are problematic. Has anybody heard about anything in the effective altruism movement that might have been problematic? Effective altruism was going very, very well for many years, up until this happened. So we have a person called Sam Bankman-Fried, who was a genius. He was less than 30 years old when he did the world's first ever crypto exchange called FTX. And it was just on the rise. So he became the world's, I think, the biggest and the youngest billionaire to ever live. And the amazing thing about Sam is that he was one of the biggest donors to effective altruism. So suddenly, from a very small group that didn't have a lot of money, effective altruists suddenly received funding by the billions coming from FTX. So he vowed to not keep anything for himself and just give everything to charity. So suddenly there was a lot of good being done because effective altruism charities, real charities that save real people, got all this funding from FTX. However, as I was giving this course last year, in the middle of the semester, this broke out. FTX completely collapsed because they found out that Sam was committing serious fraud. So he took money from FTX and basically laundered it and put it into something different. The whole crypto world suffered as a result. I know people who worked in crypto. I think in Hong Kong is a banking system, in finance. Quite a few people were invested in this. So a lot of people suffered, but people lost billions. Like in the public, a lot of harm has been done. And effective altruism just generally suffered very much as a result, because first, a lot of money that was supposed to come in, they were already expecting this money to come in, did not come in. And then because Sam was one of the vocal voices of effective altruism, and he was on the front saying, I will give everything, I've given billions, I'm going to give more. His association with effective altruism just tainted everything regarding effective altruism. So a lot of people who might believe or might support effective altruism are now very, very hesitant. It's like maybe utilitarianism went a little bit too far. When you ask Sam, like, why did you do this? At the beginning, he just said, I didn't do this. This is a mistake. But at some point, it became more of a story of I just wanted to do the most good. So a lot of rationalization in order to do all the good that he wanted to do, he said, I'm just like laundering some money, just moving this from here to there. I'm just doing all sorts of things that I'm not supposed to do. But the greater good is that people's lives are saved. But now as a result, actually the problems that he created for effective altruism end up hurting a lot of people and perhaps preventing lives from being saved. And a big problem for effective altruism that is still trying to recover from being associated with one of the biggest frauds in the finance history. So it's going to take a long time for them to recover from this. So I had a real dilemma. Should I frame this course as effective altruism? Should I let's just like put this away and focus on scientific evidence? I think there is value in effective altruism. There are some things that we can learn from them. They do open science. They care about quantification. They care about improving themselves. They do a lot of good in the world, give well, open philanthropy, and such. But I do want you to be aware of the challenges, and I do want you to be careful of whenever we say we want to do the most good, so doing more good and doing good better, a lot of questions needs to be asked about what does this mean? Does it mean that because we want to do more good, we can hurt other people? And the answer is absolutely not. So this is not what effective altruism is about, at least in my view. So when you ask most of the Peter Singer, Will McCaskill, you ask them what they think about this, of course, this is not what they intended. But some people take utilitarianism a little bit too far, in this case, very, very far. So we want to stay away from stuff like that. But there is some evidence, like Molly presented, of how people come to rationalize this kind of thing. It's like, I'm not really hurting anybody. Overall, for the greater good, I'm actually doing, I'm contributing. So just wanted to put this out there. I'm going to skip the cross-cultural differences. I don't think it's that important. And I want to spend the last 15 minutes that we have talking about regrets. And I want to ask you to help me with the Mentimeter. So this is a study that we actually ran 2 years ago. And I want you to kind of reflect on this and share with me a little bit about what is the thing in your life that you regret the most at this moment. And then after you wrote a little bit about that, then what is the thing about your life that you regret, that you will regret the most at the age of 80? Sorry, should change this. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. So when you're 80, what do you think is the thing that you'll regret the most? So 2 questions to answer. I'll give you some time to think about this. So what is the thing about your life that you regret the most at this moment? And what do you think you will regret at the age of 80? Sorry, I'll do this again. Yeah. And as you're answering this, as you're thinking about this, try and think about, so what is exactly the difference between what I regret right now and what I will regret as an old person? Is there a difference? What separates these 2 personalities, me now, me later? How would most people react to this? What do you think other people would regret? Not taking risks. Can you give us some examples of what that means? A job opportunity. Right. So risk. Do you think there's a difference between how we consider risks in the moment compared to how we would consider this at the end of life? Right. So there's very big difference in the certainty, because when you're faced in the situation, you don't know how this is going to play out. But we all tend to be a little bit risk averse. So when we see something very risky, we say, okay, maybe not. I don't want to be disappointed afterwards if I take the wrong direction. But people do tend to regret things more when they're at the end of their lives. Looking backwards, it's like, maybe I should have taken that risk. Maybe there was something in that risk that would have made me better off, made me happier, made more meaning in my life. So very, very good example about risks. If I would show you now, what do you think most regrets would be about in the moment? What do you think people would say? Sorry? Food.
No, nothing.
I know. Nothing. No regrets. All of us are doing very, very well. We have 9 responses. Let's see what it's about. I regret not being more active in learning in the beginning of the university. No regrets. So this is in line. Nothing. This is in line. Oh, wow, that's dark. Cannot save my friend's life. Sorry about that. The thesis that we choose, maybe, okay. Not putting myself in fear, perfectionism, yeah. Caring too much about grades. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. Appreciate it. What's going to happen if I show you what we think we're going to regret when we're 80? What's that going to be about? Okay. I have 17 participants, so not being true to oneself. I think that's a big one. This person just doesn't have any regrets now or later. Kind of jealous, I have to say. Tell me the secret. I also want. Live too long. That's also kind of I have some dark personalities. Not a child, not having a child, not loving a healthy way, worrying too much about the future, not traveling, having enough experiences, not spending enough time or sleep, really important for health. Okay. Yeah, a little bit about risks and not taking opportunities. So some really interesting insights here. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Stressing too much, not having enough fun. Yeah, I can. I'm not 80, and I already like somewhere half towards that. I feel like I should have maybe spent more on that. I want to share with you something that I've done a lot of research about. It's a classic Kahneman and Tversky, 1982. This is George and Paul. So they are finance. So they deal with risks, and they have an investment. Both of them invested $1 million, and then they needed to make a decision between switching or not switching to a new investment. So either taking action and switching, or not taking action, just staying with the same kind of investment. And now we have this kind of predicament. Both of them lost 200,000 US dollars at the end from 1 million. So they lost 20% of their investment. And the question is, who feels higher regret? So the last question on the Mentimeter is this: who feels greater regret over the investment decision? Is it Paul that didn't switch, or George that switched the investment? Oh, do they know about the other person? Yeah, no, they don't. They don't. But that's a good question. I would typically would like to ask you, so why would, so do you see some moderating factor? And there are people who have looked at that, but this is the basic paradigm. We can play a lot of games with this paradigm, and this is a very good question to ask, because there's lots of questions that we want to ask about this, right? Yeah, do they know each other? Do they know about the outcome of one another? Are they comparing each other to the other, or just with themselves or not? But for the sake of this, it's like, who feels stronger regret? The way that we typically do this in the experiments is that we show a third party, Paul and George, and we just say, who do you think experiences higher regret individually? Is it Paul or is it George? Just the way that I showed you on the Mentimeter. So what's going to be the outcome? Who experiences higher regret? What would most people say? George. So this is very much in line with most of the findings, that it seems like for bad outcomes, negative outcomes that has just happened, I just lost some money, people who take risks that are associated with action tend to regret this more than people who did not act, which is why we have a lot of action aversion. We don't want to act because we are afraid of this happening. And we've investigated many reasons for that. It seems like the number one is about the assumption of responsibility. So it just seems like there's something in action that is more memorable, is more associated with accountability, responsibility. There's judgment, how people judge me. So if I didn't do anything, it's not very clear, did I not do anything because I failed to take action? Maybe there was no decision to make. Maybe I was just postponing my action. But if you took action, it seems like something that is clear that people tend to regret a little bit more. So in their classic study, it's about 92 to 8%. In our studies, it's a little bit lower than that, but it's very similar to that. So Kahneman and Tversky, almost everything that we run from them replicates very well. We also did a bunch of things in order to try and explain this. Their explanation back then is the concept of normality. It seems like not taking action or being risk averse is considered to be the norm. And they say if you deviate from the norm, which is taking action, then you assume more responsibility. It's more risky. And therefore, people tend to think about actions as it's more prominent in their cognition. We're not going to go into all of this, but I've replicated this a bunch of times. So you can see our ratio was about like 75% to 20%. This is our control condition. So this is exactly what Kahneman and Tversky did, but we also manipulated the norms. So they said, okay, it's about the norm. I wanted to make sure it's really about the norms, and I manipulated the norms. And you can see that when action norms, when there are norms to act, then it increases a little bit. And when there's the norm to not act, then it decreases a little bit. But so norms do matter, but it just seems like overall, there's a lot more regret for action than for inaction. So even in the action norms, when the norms are to take action, people tend to regret action a little bit more. Now, this is the study by Gilovich that followed up on Tversky and Kahneman, and they were saying, Tversky and Kahneman, you missed something very, very important. And this thing that you missed is, for example, if we take these lovely students, so we have Jim and Dave. Jim studied in the East Coast University, and Dave studied in the East Coast University. And one of them decided to switch to another university, and Dave decided to switch to stay with the same university. And the outcome is that both of them are unsatisfied with their decision, either to stay or to switch. So both of them experienced the same negative outcome. Only one of them took action and did something in order to change their circumstances. So who tends to regret more? And what's interesting is that we ask this in all sorts of different ways. And here it's the contrast between short-term and long-term. So in the moment when they experienced dissatisfaction, which one of them regrets this more? But then later in their lives, when they contemplate at the age of 80, who is more likely in the long term to regret things? And it seems like Gilovich and Medved were arguing that actually in the short term, we regret taking action, but in the long term, we regret not taking action. So missed opportunities, a little bit like we discussed over here. Kit, who did the course like you many years ago, then became a TA, then did an MPhil at HKU, and now he's a PhD student at Chinese University, did this replication. So we did a replication of that. He did this for his MPhil thesis, which is really interesting, and we finally published last year in Collabra. And we tried to replicate studies 1, 3, 4, and 5 of this. And we found support for the original findings using different designs in studies 1, 3, and 4, yet with weaker effects. One of the studies did not work out. But what was interesting is that, to my great surprise, Gilovich noticed our study. So he decided to do with his own student another replication of study 5, where he did find support for that. So happy community for everybody, all the studies are replicated. And overall, I can say that this is very, very meaningful. This is, for example, the question that they had. When you look back in your experiences in life and think of those things that you regret, what would you say you regret more? Those things that you did but wish that you hadn't, or those things that you didn't do but wish that you had? And it's interesting just to read their articles, because it's amazing what people tend to write. So, for example, failures to act. So missed educational opportunities is a big one. Failure to seize the moment, not spending enough time with friends or relatives. I think this comes up quite a bit. Also, a lot of things that I hear and I see from our samples, especially with students, is missed romantic opportunities. That they saw somebody in class, or they saw something in like a social event, and they didn't do something to approach. Lots of risks. I don't know, is this going to work out? But then later in life, when they're 80, like thinking, it's like, oh, that person that I met in class, if only I have done the right thing in order to approach this person, maybe I could have had the love of my life. That kind of thing. What do people regret about actions? You can see the numbers are much lower than the numbers for failures to act. Bad educational choice, rushed in too soon, so it has to do with risk. Romantic thing is still up there, unwise romantic adventures, bad career decisions, wasted effort. And what's nice is that we replicated this. We saw very similar patterns. So you're welcome to look at Kit's very, very interesting thesis. Overall, it's these kinds of patterns. So comparing the short term with the long term, you can see that in the short term, we regret action more than inaction, but when people look back many years back, they tend to regret more inaction. So we did this in multiple studies, and we looked at both regret and responsibility. So a really nice replication study by Kit. I'm going to wrap up with actually getting you to hear something from Tom Gilovich to summarize the whole thing about regret. So I want you to think about the journey that we went through, starting from gratitude and what gratitude means to us, the link between happiness and prosociality, and finally about regret. So the reason why regret is attached to this part of the course, to this session, is because I don't want you to regret things when you're 80 years old. And I would like to urge you to take action in order to increase your happiness, to be meaningful, have meaningful connections with others, with your family. So hear the science behind regret and think about what would make your life more meaningful and how to avoid regrets in the future. So here's a little bit from Tom Gilovich.
Yeah, regret's interesting in a whole bunch of ways. One is you could imagine a world in which it would be hard to study, because if you ask people, "Oh, tell me about your biggest regrets," people say, I don't want to do that. Turns out not to be the case. I'm sure there are some regrets that people hide from us, but people, especially over time, really want to talk about them, and they find some value in talking about them. So we learn a lot, and among the interesting things is when you make a mistake, it's often a mistake of action that hurts the most. So imagine that you're in a grocery store line and it's just the person in front of you has 1 million coupons and they're just taking forever, and you see the line next to you, people are zipping through it. You face a decision, should I switch to that line or not? Imagine you do switch and that line slows down, the line you were in speeds up. You're going to really kick yourself that, it's a mistake of commission. You moved, you took action. You feel much worse about that than a mistake of inaction. At first, in the short term. Over time, however, turns out to be completely the opposite. People's most common regrets, long-term regrets over their life, are things they didn't do. I never went to college. I never learned to play a musical instrument. I should have pursued this person who expressed an interest in me at a certain period of life, etc. It's the regrets of inaction that loom larger. And it's kind of interesting to explore why that is, what's responsible for that temporal pattern. And what seems to be at play is precisely because the action regrets hurt more initially, you do more to deal with them. People have talked about a psychological immune system, very much like the physical immune system that protects the body. This protects our psychology. We rationalize things, we think of them in a different light, and become more comfortable with them. And one of the ways that we justify actions is to say, yeah, that's a problem, but here's a silver lining. Yes, I married the wrong person, but I wouldn't have these great kids if I hadn't done that. It's harder to identify silver linings from inaction. That is, I didn't do anything new, but I learned a lot. Well, that almost doesn't make sense. There are times where it certainly could be the case, but those are rare. So there's a whole bunch of things that conspire to make your inaction regrets longer lived, and so those are the ones you end up with later in life.
Final conclusion, tying everything together: gratitude, happiness, prosociality, regrets. I would urge you to think about regrets as your 80-year-old self, to take risks, take action, do things so that you don't regret in action later in life. And this has to do both with doing more good, It also has to do with spending more time with people, being more grateful for what it is that we do and the people that we're with. So tying all of this together, I hope that you'll get some benefit from some of the insights from science, from people like Tom Gilovich, Molly Crocker, and others that we mentioned. So this wraps up the happiness version section of this course. Next week, we're going to go back to classics in social psychology. This is an advanced social psychology class. So we're going to discuss some of the classics, Stanford experiment, more electric shocks to others, and other interesting experiments. Are they solid, not solid? Are they real? Should we pay attention to them? What should we take away about all that? And all that ties into one very fundamental issue. What is human nature? Are we good or are we bad? I'll see you next week.